Hi, everyone. Today we're going to have a really insightful conversation. We are talking about Mexico. You all know that I focus a lot on country scouting, so I really want to have people on the channel that have actually lived or at least visited a place for a while so that they can have a conversation with you all in real time about what that place is like. I'm going to hand it over to my guest to introduce herself and tell us about the work that you do in the world.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Maya. My name is Yammy Arega, and I'm a growth strategist for Black women entrepreneurs. And what that really means is I help them grow and scale their businesses without the burnout, so without the added stress that can come with that, by implementing strategies that I've learned that throughout my career. I have a decade plus experience within business development and marketing. And so really, I'm really excited about getting to use those skills to help Black women, to serve Black women, um, especially now as we're being pushed out of the workforce en masse due to the current administration. And also, just doing so in a way that makes growing a business exciting. We are the largest demographic to, I think currently Black women are the largest demographic of growing entrepreneurs. And so I think it's a really exciting time for us to build our wealth, build our legacy, and do so in a way that doesn't cost us our peace and our ease.
That sounds incredible. Just listening to what you offer definitely is needed. So much is going on. We definitely need peace and ease for sure.
Yes.
So, with that being said, you are currently in Mexico. Could you talk about where you are exactly in Mexico and how you decided that that was the particular city that you wanted to land in at this point in time?
Sure. So I'm currently in San Miguel de Allende, Mexico. I've been here for about 6 weeks, and I've been in Mexico overall for about 3.5 months. So this is the third city I've been in since being in Mexico, and I will say this is my favorite city so far. I landed here because I knew there was a large Black expat community here, and I had just heard great things about the city and just sort of the pace of life here. It's not too overwhelming or overstimulating, and having previously been in other cities such as Mexico City, I knew this sounded more like the pace that I wanted to live in.
And what was the third city that you have been in Mexico?
So this is the third city. This is the third city, San Miguel de Allende. I started off in Mexico City when I first arrived in Mexico, and then I moved on to Querétaro for a little bit. And so this is now the third city that I'm in, and I'm really enjoying it here so far.
That's fantastic. What would you say were some of the differences between the cities in terms of like some of the advantages that you see in those particular cities? Maybe what's like unique to those cities, and then what were
Mhm.
some of the disadvantages in those three cities?
I'll start off in Mexico City because that's where I landed. So overall, I've been in Mexico for about 3.5 months, and I spent my first few weeks in Mexico City. And I will say, when I first landed there, the pace of life was really fast. What I didn't know before coming to Mexico City is that it's a city of, I think, 23 million people. And so, I've never been to New York City, but I would imagine it's somewhat similar in terms of like how fast things move, how many people there are. There's a lot of traffic if you're trying to get about in the city. It was great in a sense because there's access to basically anything you might need in terms of like healthcare or big box stores. Like if you want to go to Costco, they have Costco in Mexico City, so you kind of still get that taste of home. And just for context, I'm from Long Beach, California, so it was nice to have those aspects. Lots of restaurants to visit, plenty of museums, like if you're really into tourism. But like I said, it was a little bit overstimulating for me, as someone who has just I'm a very sensitive person and my nervous system gets overwhelmed very easily. So I kind of knew right off the bat that it wasn't the city that I was going to stay in long term. But that's just me personally. A lot of people land there and they really enjoy it there and they end up living there. There's a large Black expat community there as well. So I would say just really do what works best for you. But for me, it was more so a city that I would visit, not necessarily live in. And then the next city I went to was Querétaro, which I really loved in terms of it's just a lot slower pace of living. It also is just a really safe city. So it's a UNESCO heritage site. So it's one of the safest cities in the world. And a lot of people settle down there, if they have families or if they just, are maybe in retirement. So I would say I kind of ran into like the opposite problem there. Like it was a little bit too slow for me. Um, while it is a very beautiful city and there's a lot, to see in terms of like historical sites, I did ultimately decide that that isn't necessarily a city I would live in long term either. Um, but San Miguel de Allende so far has been my favorite. And I will say that is because, it's a very vibrant city, it's very colorful. I think it's sort of what you think of when you think of Mexico, like maybe not, it's not a beach town, but it's very vibrant and just the centro or the historical downtown district is very full of life. There's a lot to see. There's a lot to see and do there. Lots of restaurants. I mean, all over Mexico, you can get a lot of great food. But yeah, it's been my favorite so far. There's also a really large Black expat community here, which I have been able to meet with and engage with. And I think that's sort of given me like a taste of home. And it's made it feel more so like a place that I could see myself living long term. So while I am currently living like a digital nomad life and not planning on living or settling down anywhere permanently at the moment, it is somewhere that I could see myself returning to live.
That's really nice. I'm glad that you found that. And I feel basically from your story that it lets us know that there's a lot of diversity within
Yes,
one country. We don't
absolutely.
feel beholden to one specific city. There
Yeah.
could be other cities that actually could have a better vibe for you.
Yeah, and that's actually why I started off in Mexico.
Mm.
My plan is to continue to bop around other Latin American countries, but I knew Mexico had a lot of diversity, and there were just so many places and different regions to explore. And it's, geographically the closest to where I was living before in the US. So I figured, why not start in Mexico, get a little bit of a taste of the different cities. And yeah, so that's how I landed here.
Perfect. And I just want to reiterate what you said about Mexico City. I've been to Mexico City too, and I would
Yeah.
agree with you 100%. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of
Yes.
people everywhere. There are a lot of lines, there's a lot of noise, but then there's also a lot that you can do in that city. I do think
Yes.
it is a quick city, and as a person that has also been to New York, I could see the similarities there.
Yeah.
Just kinda fast paced, everybody kinda
Mhm.
moving, doing their own thing.
Tall
It's
buildings. Yeah.
definitely the vibe of Mexico City, and so I like what you said related to, like, your personality and knowing what would work for you based off who you are as a person because every city will not work for every person.
Yes. Yes.
And there's been a lot of conversation that Mexico City is the way to go.
Mhm.
And so letting people know that it's okay to land somewhere else if Mexico City doesn't work for them.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think when we think of expats or people moving from the US to Mexico, we think of these big cities like Mexico City or maybe like Puerto Vallarta, that is like a little bit closer to home in terms of like there's a lot of English speakers there and so on and so forth. So I think it's a good place to land, if you're just coming from the US and you need a little bit of time to integrate into the culture, into the language. Because, yeah, there are a lot of English speakers there. And while I do advise, trying to learn the language of the country that you're moving to, it's a good way, it's kind of like a soft landing. Yeah.
And this is a perfect for us to move right into the next question of language. What has it been like for you speaking the language? Did you notice kind of how you already mentioned one of the cities there was more English being spoken there in the three cities that you went to? Did you notice it was like easier to speak the language or people were quote unquote more helpful with speaking the language, more understanding, or did it seem all the same?
One thing that I will say across all three cities that I've been to is that everyone will do their best to help you. Like if you're going up to someone and you have a question, maybe you're at the grocery store and you're looking for someone, they will work with you no matter if they can speak English or not, no matter if you can communicate with them in Spanish or not. And so I will say that's sort of been my biggest takeaway. But in terms of English speakers, I would say Mexico City is the place where I found the most people who are able to speak both English and Spanish. Um, Querétaro and San Miguel de Allende. San Miguel de Allende is actually interesting because there are quite a few expats here, like from not just from the US, but from like Canada as well. And a lot of folks come here to retire. So there are quite a few people here who speak English as well, because just kind of the nature of the city has quite a few expats and tourists. Querétaro, you could find some people who speak English, but for the most part, folks are Spanish speakers. For me, as someone who doesn't speak Spanish fluently, I'm trying to learn slowly. And it's kind of like bringing back memories of taking Spanish in high school. It's kind of like being refreshed in my mind. As someone who doesn't speak the language fluently, I have been making an attempt, and in worst case scenario, or if there's like an emergency or something, I can always just whip out Google Translate on my phone and communicate with them that way. So I don't think it's been very challenging to communicate with folks, especially when you're talking to people who have a willingness to, try to communicate with you.
I love that. I love that you're trying, doing the best that you can. People appreciate it, and I do think that wherever we are, we should give it a try, especially like
Yes.
you said, if people are willing to help you along the way.
Yeah.
And I had a friend actually that mentioned that she could never live somewhere where she didn't speak the language.
Mm.
Wow, so many people do that all the time.
Yeah. I think that automatically reminds me of like all the folks that, kind of had to immigrate to the US, for example, and, don't necessarily speak English, but still have to get by in terms of work and whatnot. So, yeah, I think when you think of it from that perspective, it's like if you want to make it happen, you can make it happen. I'll just say that. Yeah.
That's a good way of ending it. If you
Yeah.
wanna make it happen, you can make it happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, people will support you along the way, and I can imagine that you've learned some things in the time that
Yeah.
you've been there.
Yeah, being immersed in the culture is a great way to learn a language. like I said, like I had taken Spanish for a few years in high school, but you don't realize how much you remember until you're sort of forced to use it. And so there's definitely been, some moments where I'm like, oh, I actually did better in that situation than I would have expected just because I was sort of forced to speak Spanish, because the other person maybe wasn't able to speak English. So I think sometimes we underestimate ourselves, and it's sort of been a nice challenge. To kind of be pushed out of my comfort zone.
Way to go. So it is possible to
It
be
is
pushed out of
possible,
your
yes.
comfort zone.
Yeah.
Yes. We love to see that. We love to see that. Okay, so one thing I wanted to talk to you about too, and I think this might also go along with language, is what was the treatment that you have received in terms of locals? On this
Mhm.
channel, there is a lot of focus of finding places that are safe for Black people and especially Black women. There is no reason to leave the US to go to a place that is violent towards Black people. So we always need to know how are Black people, how are Black women being treated in a particular space? And is there a recommendation for people to live in that space?
Oh, absolutely. And just again, to give some context, so I'm from Long Beach, California. It's a very diverse city. Growing up, I was raised around a whole lot of different cultures, like it's a very much a melting pot of a city. And still, with that being said, I still experience racism as a Black person living in the US. And so you don't realize, for me and for a lot of folks, you don't realize how dysregulated your nervous system gets from that until you land in a place where you're not being treated that way, where you're not being alienated because of the color of your skin. And being in Mexico, all three cities that I've been in, the locals have been overwhelmingly kind. They've been overwhelmingly welcoming. Um, and it just makes you realize how dehumanizing it is to live as a Black person in the US. To not just receive sort of the basic respect as a human being. um, so long and short, I would just say it's been great being here. I have been treated so warmly and so kindly. I can't even think of one moment. So I've been here for a little over 3 months now, and I don't think I've been treated poorly because of my race once. Um, Maybe I get like some curious stares when I'm out and about, and that's more of like oh, like I can't really figure out like what your ethnicity is or your nationality is, but it's never hostile. It's never rude or just coming from a place of hate. And I think right now, where we are in the US as a country, that can't be said about like the country overall. Even if you are living in a quote unquote liberal state like California, I mean, there are a lot of pockets of California that are overwhelmingly conservative. And yeah, without getting into the politics of it all too much, I will just say I have felt so much more peaceful and at ease outside of the US. Yeah.
We could take a whole nother hour on what
Yeah.
you just said.
Yes.
I could not honestly agree with you more. This has been so challenging to also, as a person that is living in California, to find out that places are quote unquote liberal, but they still hold racist ideologies. Like I never had expected that my whole life. I had been
Mhm.
told like California is just like this beautiful place. It's so fun. It's like so open. And then I get here and there are people with the US flag, flying, hanging on the truck. And this is like today, this is like right now.
Yeah.
It's not like
Yeah.
years ago. And so when you talked about how dysregulated the nervous system can be in terms of the interactions, I feel that all of the time, right? Like in these jobs specifically
Mm.
with people in
Yes.
competition, it is so exhausting.
Mhm.
And I'm just like, "I can't wait to be on the other side with you." I am
Yes.
counting down
Yes.
time. My leave is supposed to be next year, and this is the ultimate goodbye for me. It really has shown me
Yes.
what the US is like, what it was capable of. I had already thought to leave years ago and
Mhm.
end up staying past that time until now,
Yeah.
just to be even more irritated than
Yeah.
I was at that time. And
Yeah.
so I'm with you. It is just a different type of air that you can breathe. It's a different type
Mhm.
of experience.
Yeah.
You are right about the stairs, though. I think that
Yeah.
globally is
Yeah.
people are going to stare.
Yeah.
But to not feel like your life is threatened, to not feel that
Mm.
you are a threat to people, to
Yes.
not feel like these microaggressions every day, just be
The
nice.
microaggressions, which honestly just are so impactful on our lives. Like, I think about just the day to day, like, so you're experiencing racism at work, you're experiencing racism when you're going to the store. Like, it's just, it takes a toll on your health, it takes a toll on your psyche. And again, you just don't realize just how much of a toll it takes until you're out of that situation. And so, yeah, I'm excited for your move as well. I think at this point in my life, I'm just a proponent of as many Black people getting out of the US as possible because I think we deserve so much better than what we are experiencing there. I think with the way things are going right now, I hate to be, I don't think I'm a pessimist. I think I'm just a realist. And with the way things are going right now, I don't see things getting better in the near future. I don't know if the US as we know it will continue to exist because it's just been a pattern of just so much turmoil, so much chaos. Um, yeah, I think folks, so I think it's called an extinction burst, and I think that's what we're experiencing right now, whereas as white folks become less of a majority, they're sort of going out with a bang, and just really clinging on to whatever's left, whatever power that they have, and they're really holding on tightly to that. And I think it's imperative for us to save ourselves if we can. I know it's not realistic for everyone to get out of the US, but I think it's more realistic than folks realize it can be for some.
Yes, we thank you for that so much. It is true. Just seeing things and the way that people are acting in a way that we have probably not seen in our lifetime. I'm sure there are some people living that have seen some of these things, but
Yeah.
for us in particular, very, very disturbing. All of
Yeah.
the things that are constantly happening in the US, as you said, as people try to cling and hold on to that last little bit of power. So I know that you had mentioned that as many Black folks that can get out of the US should do that. Agree with.
Mhm.
Do you feel like we have to have a full rolled out plan? I know you said you, like, went to Mexico, you bopped around different cities, like, how much
Yeah.
had you prepared ahead of time? How much does one have to prepare to just be able to go? I think, like, a lot of times we're like, "I have to have everything perfectly laid out,
Yeah.
country, city, all of the things." But what would
Yes.
you say about that? Or what are ways that we can get out quickly that it don't
Yeah.
have to involve planning too much?
Yes. So as I mentioned, I'm sort of living the digital nomad life right now. And this isn't the first time that I've done this. So back when I had left my first corporate job back in 2021. And I just sort of needed like a little bit of a respite because I was experiencing burnout. For context, I live with a disability and I also am neurodivergent. So that takes a toll on how much energy I have day to day. And so I burn out in the corporate environment quite quickly because of the demands and so on and so forth. And so I had taken about I think it was, so I was doing some freelance work, but I had taken about 2 years and I just was traveling around the state of California. And there's a little bit of a tangent, but that's how I know how much racism exists within California. But I was house sitting essentially. So I had learned about house sitting through Stephanie Perry of Exodus Summit, as many know her. And I just took the time off. I started house sitting full, not thinking it was going to turn into anything, but I started house sitting full time. And so I sort of grew accustomed then to the digital nomad life and just not necessarily having like a home base. And there are pros and cons with that, right? So you can definitely enjoy the flexibility and the freedom that comes along with that. But there's also, just that feeling of not really having a home base, not really having that aspect. So I was already familiar with that lifestyle, and so I kind of at the beginning of this year, I was at a separate corporate job that I had been with for about a year and a half. And unfortunately, I was one of the I'm one of the people in the statistic of 400,000 Black women being let go. I was in a DEI type role with a company that spoke about equity and yada yada. And of course, despite being a very good employee and very great at what I do, I was let go without any sort of warning. I was actually had just been promoted about 2 months prior. So it came as a complete blow and shock to me. Um, and so that moment really made me realize like, we have no control over anything. And I think just the administration in general has shown us that we have no idea of what's going to happen next. And so, what I realized that I just sort of came to the conclusion that because nothing, you can do all the planning in the world. And sorry, I'm sort of taking the long way to answer your question, but I promise I'm answering. We can do all the planning in the world, and you still don't know what can happen. And so with that realization, I had just started my consulting practice helping Black women. I had gotten my first few clients, and I was like, okay, well, I have a source of income. I know the cost of living in Mexico and just Latin America in general is less than the US, definitely less than California. And so I did not have all my ducks in a row. I just sort of was like, okay, I'm going to get a 6 month tourist visa and just see explore Mexico, explore other Latin American countries, see what cities resonate with me, where I enjoy myself, and then maybe down the road I can settle down in one of these countries, one of these cities. So I did not have everything planned out. I just knew that, I was headed to Mexico first. I wanted to check out a few cities. And so that's where I am now. What I do know, however, is that it was costing me more to be in the US. And I don't mean just financially, I mean in terms of my physical and mental health. Um, so I live with endometriosis, which is like a painful diagnosis. And because of that, I've undergone, surgery and whatnot. And that has, cost a lot of money. Healthcare is just so exorbitant in the US. And so, again, when I had lost my job, that meant losing my health insurance. And so I knew, leaving the country would mean having alternatives to that. Um, and I also knew that in terms of my mental health, I wasn't doing well in the US because, there is such a culture of like, you need to be a go getter, you need to hustle. And if you're not sort of adhering to that lifestyle, then you're, lazy, or you're not, pulling yourself up by the bootstraps, or whatever terms they like to use to promote capitalism and consumerism and so on and so forth. So I knew I needed a change. I needed a slower pace of living. I had heard great things about different Mexican cities, and so that's how I landed here. And I plan to continue just popping around to other countries as well to see, what feels most like home. Yeah. I hope that answered your question.
You don't have to worry. You take as long as you want to answer the question, okay? You definitely did. Uh, just so many nuggets there. I think the main thing is, like, you don't have to have an entire plan to be able to go. I love what you did, like you said, "I just got this tourist visa. I'm just gonna travel around and see what's going on." Like, you didn't have, "I know exactly where I'm gonna live. I know exactly where I'm gonna stay. This is
Yeah.
it forever." You should have the opportunity to be able to bop around and to be able to find what makes the most sense to you. And so I
Yes.
love that you had that ability to do that. I also wanna say that I'm terribly sorry about the loss of your job. That is
Yeah.
horrible,
Thank
especially
you.
to get a promotion and then but it also shows you how they roll here
Yes.
in the US, right? Don't care
Yeah.
anything about us from one day to the next, and so
Yes.
not surprising with that at all, and now
Mm.
you have your own business, which is
Mm.
great, and, like, when you said you got your first clients, I
Yeah.
just really lit up with that, so I'm happy that you were able to transition into something else, and then you mentioned the healthcare.
Mm.
The healthcare is a major issue in the US. I mean, you just
Yeah.
go for one appointment, you come out having to pay all this money that you didn't even expect. You're like, "Wow."
Yes.
And I don't know if you know, some people are like, "I won't even go into the hospital, I won't even see a doctor because I don't have the
Exactly.
money to pay for that."
Yes. Yes. It's
Well,
insane. And if I could just share, a quick story. I know I've told you this before, but I had an experience. So I was in Mexico City and I was refilling a prescription, or I needed to refill a prescription, which required me to go see a doctor. And when I was, halfway through my appointment, I realized that I had forgotten my form of payment. And the doctor, didn't stress out. He still, was fine with seeing me throughout the rest of the appointment. By the way, no insurance required. Yet still a very affordable visit, and it's very affordable to get my prescriptions filled. But he just offered, he said, let's finish up the appointment. Where are you staying? Are you staying nearby? I said, I'm staying about 10 minutes away. He offered to drive me home after the appointment to get the form of payment, and not in like a weird or creepy way, by the way. Very professional. And yeah, I finished the appointment. I got my prescription. He drove me home. I gave him the payment. Again, very, very affordable. Um, and it just really shows you how much the care and healthcare is missing in the US, because if I was in that same situation at the US, within the US, first of all, form of payment would have been taken right before I could even see the doctor. They said, "You got your funds? If you don't, then too bad." And yeah, the way you're treated uh, when you're seen in the US, it's very rushed. A lot of times, I've experienced medical racism numerous times. Um, so it's just like, what is the point of going to the doctor if they're not even going to treat you the way that they should be treating you? If they're not going to take your diagnosis seriously? And this can be seen like for so many conditions black people face, but especially black women. Like when you look at the black maternal uh, mortality, what's the rate? Black maternal mortality rate um, in the US. And it's just, it's insane how we are treated as a collective, when we're just trying to take care of our health, when we're just trying to take care of our health and be treated as humans.
what you said about the care is missing in healthcare
Yes.
is the takeaway right there. You are so right. when you're in the US, the first thing is that payment and what? That insurance. I remember that,
Yes.
like, why do they always ask about insurance? I'm just in here for this particular appointment. Why do we always have to do that, right? And so I love the fact that you were able to get your form of payment later. And sadly, when you said that you weren't driven there in a creepy way, I think that's where our mind goes. Like, why would
Yes.
somebody just take you and allow
Yes.
you to get your payment? Like, they must want something else. But, like,
Yes.
no, exactly what you've mentioned. I've
Yeah.
had similar experiences. When I lived in Colombia, they came to my house to do my COVID
Yes.
test. And I was
Yeah.
like, "Oh, okay, we're just like in the living room, all equipment is out." I was like, this is amazing.
Yes. Yes. No, I'm so glad you said that because I actually had a similar experience. I met someone here in San Miguel. So I went to a brunch for Black expats, and I met someone there, and she was telling me about she was just sharing some resources with me, and she was like, "Oh, and then here's a doctor that does house calls. Like, you should just keep his number." And it's just like, it's just such a communal feeling when you just have access to resources, and you just feel taken care of. And I say this as someone who is pretty introverted. Like, I like doing my own thing. I'm kind of like, that's just how I've always been. Like, I really am just kind of introverted. And yet, still, I've been able to find people here who I feel safe around, who I feel in community with. Like, you don't need to be some really outgoing, extroverted person to be able to find care and community outside of the US.
That is great. And y'all, I think all the time, I'm like, you're an introvert out here giving us all the gems and all the stories. We love to see that.
Yes.
That is fantastic. So you did mention that you were able to find community. There are Black
Mhm.
expats in Mexico. Obviously, there's just a lot of conversations if people don't know. On Facebook, you can find a lot of Black expats on WhatsApp. Could you tell us how you found the Black expats that you know and what has been your experience connecting with those Black expats? Like you said,
Yeah.
there was somebody that told you about some resources. What has that
Yeah.
been like?
Yes. So, obviously, the biggest resource I would say is Exodus Summit, just because I feel like they're sort of a hub. If you're just sort of starting out on your, thinking about moving abroad, or you're not really sure where to move, I think that's a great place to start. However, if you just go on Facebook, and I'm not a big Facebook person, especially now with Mark doing all the crazy things, but if you go on Facebook and you type in like brothers and sisters of so and so city, or if you search like black folks and black people in Thailand or black people in Mexico City, you will find a Facebook group that or multiple Facebook groups depending on what city. Mexico City, there's such a large black expat community there. But just go onto Facebook and search for groups where you can find communities, and you don't even necessarily need to meet in person. Like, those online communities are really great for searching and looking for resources. Maybe you need to find a doctor for a specific ailment. Maybe you're just looking for like the most popular restaurants, like where you can get like American food if you're just feeling like homesick. Like, there's so many resources that you can find within the online communities. But I think it's really great to get into in-person communities as well. And the way that you can do that is, folks will host in-person events, like the one that I mentioned. I went to a brunch with it here in San Miguel. I think the first week that I arrived, like the first weekend I arrived, and I was able to meet quite a few people there, that are pillars of the community, but also just folks that are maybe just visiting for a while, folks that are thinking about moving to San Miguel. So it's like, you don't need to be living here long term to find community or to find resources.
Yeah, that sounds really, really good that you don't have to live there long term to find a resource. I also want to mention that I was in the WhatsApp group of Black Girl Magic in Mexico City.
Okay.
Fantastic group. I met up with a group of Black women when I was in Mexico. So, to your point, I was in Mexico City maybe about a week, and I met up with a
Mhm.
group of Black women, like 5 Black women. just in that week to like talk about the
Yes.
experiences in Mexico City.
Yes.
Fantastic. That was three
Yeah.
years ago, and I still talk to one of the women from that group. So
Nice.
exactly what you mentioned about these groups, you never know who you can meet, what
Yes.
connections you can make, how long you can keep those connections, and you don't
Mhm.
live there long term because you're living. I
Yeah.
just popped in and out.
Yeah, and there's a lot of folks who do that as well. You know, they're like, I'm just here for a week or two, and I just want to go out and like see things with some people, especially Mexico City. I think Mexico City is one of those cities where you know, you want to be with someone when you're traveling, when you're doing things. It's not to say that you can't be there solo and enjoy yourself, but I think it's a great place to be in community with folks. You know, whether that's a partner, whether that's a friend, or yeah, just meet people there. I think there's just you know, in the US especially, I think we're sort of seeing this like loneliness epidemic and like folks are just so, you know, isolated because you're spending so many hours at work and then the only you know hours you have left like you just need to tend to your basic needs and then weekends like you know you're just again tending to your basic needs maybe spending time with family and so it's really hard to cultivate friendships when you're constantly exhausted and burnt out so if that's a concern you know for anyone watching I think you know if you're maybe feeling like you're lacking community in the city that you're in the US like moving abroad could help with that too.
I just wanted to be known that I didn't even know you would answer the questions in this way. It seems like you're a plant, but I had no idea that you were at the same time as me. Yes, the
Yeah.
isolation, I had said that this individualistic mentality is
Yeah.
trash. And
Yes.
go abroad and people are so communal. They're like, let's hang out with the
Yes.
family, let's hang out with the friends, let's do things. It's not all about working all of the time.
Ugh, yes. Look, if I didn't have to work, I wouldn't work. Let me just say that. Like, I'm glad I do work. What'd you say?
As you shouldn't, because you was over there doing all the work that you needed to do in the DEI, and they're like, "Yeah, that's not enough. Moving on."
Exactly, exactly. You know, I'm glad that the work I do now, like, I'm excited about, and I get to work with people I care about. But all in all, like, I'm okay if I don't have to work. Like, I will take the time off. Like, I'm someone who has like a lot of hobbies. Like, I love to be all up in my hobbies. You know, with the ADHD, is like I could start a new hobby each week and never get bored. So, yeah, you know, I think it's when you have more time to just relax and just be in community, you realize like, oh, this is what life is supposed to be like. It's not just supposed to be you know, hustling and working 24/7 just to make ends meet, mind you. Like you're not even getting like exorbitant wealth from doing all that. Like a lot of times, you know, you're just trying to make ends meet. And it's like, what kind of life is that? Yeah.
You're just trying to pay the rent. You work
Yes.
all that just to pay the rent. And what
Yeah.
you had mentioned, like, you can't even spend time with families and friends because
Yeah.
you're spending so much time at work. I remember as
Mhm.
a kid when my aunts, uncles, cousins would be working on holidays, and I'm like, "They work all the time. They don't at least just
Mhm.
holiday." I didn't even say multiple days. I'm like, "It's just 1 day." They didn't even get that off, and they're like, "No, no,
Yes.
no. They get paid extra to work this holiday." So I'm like, "Are you serious? Like, y'all just
Yeah.
couldn't pay them extra, like, and not have them work?"
Yes.
It's just set up for us to be working all the time. That's pretty much
Yeah.
what it's set up where for. And I
Yes.
thank you, US, for that.
Yeah.
Housing.
Mhm.
What was the housing like in the 3 places that you were? You had mentioned, like, you not needing to live in a place for a long time. Would you
Mhm.
recommend a specific type of housing if we're just trying to bop around really quickly, we're not trying to be there permanently?
Yeah.
What was it that you did in order to find your accommodations in those 3 cities?
Yeah, so far most of my stays, I think almost all of my stays have been Airbnb stays, so like longer Airbnb stays. And I do have my qualms with Airbnb, you know, like and they do very much disrupt um you know the economy for within cities for local landlords, etc. So I will say Airbnb is not perfect. However, just do your research, like look at the reviews, see how they treat the people that stay with them. And if you can stay with, maybe like a family, like if you're living on a what are they called? An attached unit or whatever the case may be, and you can have access to someone who can help you if need be. But I've found Airbnb the simplest way to go, just because you don't have to worry about like paying for extra utilities or anything like that. Like it's all just in one price. And that's just sort of been the easiest way for me to bop around. I would say if you're going to stay in a city for, maybe 2+ months, well, maybe 3+ months, you might be able to find something a little longer term on Facebook. There's a lot of like communities on Facebook that offer, housing, whether that's like someone that's just looking to sublet their unit for the summer, or for a few months. You might have some luck there. But because I've been in these cities for, I would say, like 6 to 8 weeks max, so far my primary way of like housing has been Airbnb.
And thank you for mentioning
Yeah.
the issues that you have with Airbnb, because
Yes.
I know that you and I have discussed the fact that in the US there is a lot of marginalization that we have faced,
Yes.
but also recognizing there are situations that we could be more advantaged in.
Yes.
Going abroad is a perfect time to see that.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Like you don't want to be a colonizer in the country that you're going to escape colonization. And I think, I've said, I've said this before, but as Black folks, we tend to be more mindful of the ways in which we show up in the world. Like we don't typically have that sort of need to dominate others in the ways that certain folks do. But there's also, because we've been, raised in the US, which is very much like you know, the US, it what's the word that I'm looking for? It raises us in a way to sort of um center ourselves. And so I think it's very important to sort of unlearn that and kind of be mindful of that when we're going abroad. We are ultimately a guest in other folks' country, and we want to show up that way. We want to be mindful and respectful of the cultures that we are living within. Um, and I think a great way of doing that is just being mindful of how and where you spend your money. Like if you could spend money with a local mom and pop shop versus like going to a big box store, that's one great example. Um, but yeah, I think it's just a matter of being mindful of how we show up when we're going to these countries.
Yeah, yeah. So you're talking about not being like a tourist, but a person that is culturally immersed when you're
Yes.
talking about speaking the language, when you're talking
Yeah.
about being mindful and paying attention to those things.
Yeah.
And as we know, there's no way for us to like completely escape all the things. Like you said, Facebook
Mhm.
while into, but yet that's how we connect with people.
Yes.
Airbnb got its issues, but yet,
Mhm.
like you said, you don't have to sit here and pay for all the things. So I don't think that one has to feel bad for participating in some of the things. Like there are problematic things everywhere, but just
Yeah.
sure, back to what you're saying, we're not doing like domination, and we're not being
Yes.
respectful to people, and
Yeah.
treating people how we would not want to be treated or have been treated in the US. Like
Mhm.
just do the best that we can the
Yes.
situation, not to cause more harm.
Yes, because ultimately, we do have a degree of privilege when we're going to these countries. The US dollar often goes a lot further. We could be considered rich to some of the folks that are living here. And so we want to be mindful that not everyone has the same income, as we do. If you're earning income from the US and bringing it abroad, and just being mindful of how it affects the economy.
Yes, and so this is like a big piece that we have been discussing about Mexico City, and the fact
Yes.
that the locals have told us to stop coming to Mexico City because of the gentrification that is occurring in that
Mhm.
particular space. So
Yeah.
I want to mention there is a city that is kind of like a lot slower and people are not speaking English as much. There are places that foreigners haven't taken over, but Mexico
Mhm.
City is one of those that, like, increasingly more and more people are going and they're just, like, essentially taking over what you said, outpricing the local people that are landlords there, people that live there probably not being able to afford to be able to live there. Those are things that are extremely problematic that should
Yeah.
be happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know Rashida Dow, again, of Exodus Summit, she talks about this a lot on her channel because she's been living in Mexico City for a while. And so I really appreciate her perspectives because she talks a lot about how, like, the infrastructure of Mexico City itself is not set up for the amount of people that are living there. And for, again, with the additional people coming in, it's just not set up. Like, it's, I think Mexico City is currently sinking. So, like, they don't have the infrastructure in place. And then again, Mexico City also experiences quite a few earthquakes, which is not something that I knew beforehand. And so, just do your research. Like, you don't want to move to a place where they don't want a lot of expats because you might not feel you might not feel as welcome there, but you also, again, just don't want to destabilize an area that is already facing their own concerns. I would think of it sort of like Hawaii, like a lot of Hawaiians have said, like, please stop traveling here. And yet folks continue to travel there. So I think it's just a matter of, being respectful of what's already going on there and not causing additional harm.
I love that. I love that you said that because yes, Hawaii is another place. We could make a list of places that said, please stop
Yes.
coming here. And we said, we're going to still go there. So,
Yes.
what we can do moving forward, because we can't control the past, we did what we did.
Yes.
Forward, what we can do is actually listen to the locals. If they are requesting us not to go to a specific place, do some research, figure out why that is, and decide on something else because there's so many places in the world. There's so many
Yes.
cities, there's so many countries.
Yeah. So
There's a
many places to go. Yeah.
so many places to go and places that are actually actively welcoming people, such as Ghana. Ghana is like, listen, Black people, Black Americans, we
Yes.
see you. I know you keep saying no one sees you. We see you.
Yeah.
Come through because we have something
Yes.
for you.
Yeah. I will say, I think, once I'm done bopping around Latin America, I think I'm going to the continent
Yeah.
next because there's just so many places I want to visit there. I know I've shared with you, like, I'm of Ethiopian descent, but there's just so many other countries that I want to visit, Ghana being one of them. I want to go to December one of these years. I want to visit, South Africa, Tanzania. There's just so many countries to visit, and yeah, I've got a lot of countries on my list.
You got so many things that you're doing. This is great. It's fantastic. You have to go to the continent and see more of the countries, right? You got 54 to choose.
Yes.
You got so much that you can see there. And as I mentioned, lots of them are welcoming us back. Lots of
Yes.
them. So
Yeah.
that is fabulous. That is
Yeah.
fabulous. This has been a really, really great conversation. I feel like we have learned so much from your perspective as a person that is bopping around, and the
Yes.
fact that a lot of times we get stuck on let's just move somewhere and stay there
Mhm.
forever. But when
Yeah.
it comes to country scouting, we really want to take a look at different places and find
Mhm.
out if that's the move for us. You said
Yeah.
that you've been there about 3 months. You're on a
Mhm.
6-month visa. Do you feel like you're going to stay in that city, or are there other cities in Mexico you'd like to visit?
Feeling like I really like it here. I also know, early November is, I believe it's Mexico Independence Day falls within early November. And they do a lot of celebrations here in the city that I'm in. So I'm thinking I might stay here for the remainder of the time, which would be like until like mid to end December. However, there are a couple other cities like I wanted to visit Oaxaca because I've heard there's like a lot of history there in terms of like within the Afro-Mexican community there. I was sort of interested in visiting Guadalajara. I've heard some mixed reviews just based on some people that I've talked to, but yeah, kind of things are kind of still up in the air, which is kind of what makes it fun and exciting is just kind of getting to fly by the seat of your pants, I guess, so to speak. So I'm really looking forward to just like the adventure side of it all, and then again, just like going on to additional countries, Ecuador, Guatemala, like there's Colombia probably. So I'm just really excited to see what happens next, but I'm not totally sure what's next.
No, that's great. Well, Yemi, let's just put it out there. I'm trying to move to Colombia next
Yeah,
year if it
yeah.
is meant to be, and I am like there next year. Come through. Always
Yes.
will be a pleasure to it's
Yes.
really cool to connect with people on the
Yes.
internet, but to also see them in real time
In
if that
person, yes.
yes.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm with you. I've also heard about the rich Afro-Mexican history that is in Oaxaca. Very
Yeah,
important to look at that. What are
yeah,
some of the mixed reviews, if you don't mind sharing, that you heard about Guadalajara? Just because we are talking about Mexico in general,
yeah.
more information, the better.
Yes. Yeah, the great things that I've heard is that, it's a very sort of artsy and, creative city, which is something that really resonates with me. Um, but I've also heard that it's not as exciting as like it's purported to be, which I thought was is interesting. That was just from one specific person though. So, everyone has their own individual idea of what's great and what's not. So, I think take everything with a grain of salt. And that's, again, one of the great parts of getting to bop around is you get to like kind of get your own firsthand experience, boots on the ground sort of experience. And just I also want to quickly say there's certain things that you don't really know to plan for until you're there. Like for example, when I landed in Mexico City, I didn't know that that it was so highly elevated. So like the altitude really threw me off. I had altitude sickness for about like the first 10 days that I was there. So a lot of times like it takes time to acclimate and just really get a sense of what the city is like. So I really think, whatever place you're scouting or thinking of moving to, it's like really whatever place you're thinking of moving to, it's really a good idea to scout it out first, because there's so many things that you just don't know until you're there.
You heard it first. Country scouting, if you're able to, and if not,
Yes.
getting information and doing research is also
Yes.
completely acceptable. What did you do to combat the sickness that you had?
Oh, I rested a lot.
Okay.
And I will say it really, because I was just coming from the US and I was still very much in that, like, let's do all the things, let's see all the things. Like, I had a whole itinerary planned. Like, I'm going to go to this museum this day, and then I'm going to go out to eat the next. Like, I had all these things planned, and my body was like, no, girl, you're just going to lay down for these 10 days and drink electrolytes. So that's really all I had to do, like, was just like rest, which isn't the most fun thing, but your body does need time if you're coming from a place that is, maybe at sea level, which Long Beach is. Your body needs time to adapt.
And did you have the sickness in all 3 cities, or was it just when you started?
It was just when I started. I think I want to say San Miguel, Mexico City is the highest altitude out of all three cities I've been to. So from yeah, after the first like week and a half or so, I've been fine.
Okay,
Yeah.
fantastic. Well, we are now coming to the conclusion of our conversation. It has been so great to have you here. Know that your expertise related to country scouting may help so many people in the future to really get to know the space of Mexico in general. To end things off, did you have any final things that you wanted to say? Any products, any services, anything that you want to advertise? You got a platform of Black women for you. Please.
Like I mentioned, I'm a growth strategist for Black women entrepreneurs. So if you are at a stage in your business journey, maybe you've been in business for a year or two and you're now kind of reaching a point where you want to scale in a way that doesn't feel super overwhelming or stressful. I will share a link with you, Dr. Maya, and hopefully you can put it in the description of the video. You can, for one, sign up to my email list, and this one link will have, hyperlinks to all of these other things. So you can sign up for my email list where I share free resources and, tips in terms of strategy to scale your business. I also have a free guide, Visibility Without Burnout. So you're able to stay visible online, without the added stress that can come along with that. And yeah, if you would like to follow me on platforms like LinkedIn, which is where I'm the most active, you can do that there as well.
Thank you so much for coming on the channel, for gracing us with your presence. I feel like we have learned so much in this hour from you, and that this will really help us all
I
who are
hope so.
interested in going to Mexico.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Maya.
Of course. Okay, everyone, we will see you next time. Have a good rest of your day.
Bye.